Just give it maybe another minute or so before starting the presentation. Hope everyone is having a good day so far. Happy Friday. And thank you all for joining today's talk. All right, I think we'll get started then. So thank you all so much for joining today. Welcome to you all. My name is Rina Hisamatsu, and I'll be presenting on how we can operationalize low carbohydrate diets today. It will revolve around meal planning, recipes, and meeting patient needs. And so I should be sharing my screen, just double checking here. All righty. Alrighty, so as a quick overview, what I will be talking about today in the presentation is a review of some of the foundational steps of meal planning on a low carbohydrate diet. Then we will also learn how to apply some of these strategies across various meals and snacks. Then we will learn how perhaps we can individualize these meal plans to meet cultural and dietary preferences. And lastly, to consider additional ways to tailor recommendations to meet our patients' needs. So most, if not all of us, are quite familiar now with the 3 core quality improvement goals within MCT2D, including the prescribing of newer anti-hyperglycemic medication, expanding the use of CGMs, as well as supporting low carbohydrate meal plans. And so today we will once again be focusing on that pillar of nutrition. So specifically ways to implement the principles of low carb eating and tailoring recommendations to meet our patient needs. So I recognize some familiar names in the audience today. However, I do also see many new faces as well. So I wanted to welcome you all. And so that we can cover all grounds, I wanted to first start with a quick recap of some of the foundations of low carb meal planning. So the low carb meal plan, I like to think of it as existing on a spectrum. The most widely used guidelines that's found in the literature will define low carbohydrate meal plans as having less than 26% of total energy intake from carbohydrates, or that's less than 130 grams of carbohydrates based on a 2,000 calorie diet. For very low carbohydrate ketogenic meal plans, that's going to be defined as less than 10% of total energy intake from carbohydrates, or less than 50 grams of carbs a day. And so what can you eat on a low carbohydrate meal plan? I like to always share this slide because it sort of shows you sort of an overall picture of a low carbohydrate meal plan. And a well-formulated low carb meal plan will prioritize protein intake, include an abundance of non-starchy vegetables, as well as fats for satiety and flavor. And so a low carbohydrate meal plan or lifestyle can be diverse and abundant, as you can see from the picture here on the left-hand side. They include many different protein sources like poultry, fish, meat, non-starchy vegetables, as well as fats. The key emphasis here on a low carbohydrate meal plan is to reduce one's intake of processed and refined carbohydrates, typically associated with sweets, desserts, sugary beverages, and refined flour or starch products. So for simplicity, one of the first nutrition resources that we developed at MCT2D was a meal planning guide, which we simply call the 3-step or the 4-step process. The first 3 steps are the same for both, and that is to pick a protein source, add in your non-starchy vegetables, and then add some fats for flavor and satiety. On a very low carbohydrate meal plan, you will focus on these first 3 steps to create a balanced meal. For those individuals with a more liberal carbohydrate goal, typically between 50 to 130 grams a day, we'll then have that fourth step of adding in some additional small amounts of complex carbs based on the individual carb goal. And these carbs can come from sources such as whole grains, starchy vegetables like sweet potatoes, beans or lentils, and fruit. So next, I wanted to share a quick tip that I learned from a physician who is part of the collaborative. He had shared that when he talks to his patients about starting a low carbohydrate lifestyle, he will always share with them the 5 Ps to avoid. So I thought this was a really great tip to share with you all in case you would like to use this tip within your clinics too. And so those 5 Ps to avoid when starting a low carbohydrate meal plan are pasta, pastries, potatoes, pop, and pain, which is bread in French. So I hope those are, quick and easy 5 top tips to avoid on a low carb lifestyle. And something that I have come to conclude time and time again in clinical practice is how much language can matter. So when I meet with my patients for the first time, it can be really helpful to go into the visit with openness, with curiosity, and a sense of that partnership, because that can help to set the tone of the conversation and help to understand our patients' backgrounds as well as their motives. On the receiving end, for the patients, they might be thinking things such as, do I feel respected? Can I trust this provider? Are they really listening and understanding my feelings? And so on this slide, I wanted to share some of those examples of phrases that I like to use in clinic and language that has helped me to connect with my patients, especially in the first phase of exploration and getting to know them, and also determining, who may be suitable to recommend a low carb lifestyle. So some of these phrases might be things like, what strategies have you used in the past? What worked well for you? What didn't? If you had the opportunity, how would you be managing your diabetes differently? What are some of your biggest health goals? And sometimes, using the scale, the 10 scale method can also be helpful. For example, how likely are you to, follow a low carbohydrate lifestyle? What are some of the barriers? What are the reasons why you choose one number over the other? And so to summarize, it's really important to first collect that patient background and assess their goals, their experiences, potential interest in low carb, as well as understanding the patient's knowledge. And that can be complemented with preliminary resources within your clinical time with them to help provide an overview of what the low carbohydrate lifestyle entails. And I have linked here some resources that describe some of the introductory bases of the low carbohydrate lifestyle, along with an overview of the different types of macronutrients as well. All right, so in the next portion of my presentation, I'd like to dive into the individual meals and identify ideas for how they may be adapted to a low carb lifestyle. A common concern that we hear from patients is that low carb meal plans are quite restrictive. However, I beg to differ in that because there are many ways to create delicious meals with lots of flavor. And you can see some examples here on this slide. And so first and foremost, what's for breakfast? What are the basics? What do we do here? The key takeaway that I want to share is to keep breakfast quick and simple most of the time. There's no need to follow the step process to a T. However, it can be really helpful to at least pick a protein source for satiety and balancing it with some vegetables or fats as suitable, and maybe some complex carbs based on the individual carb goal. And so starting with what you know is really important, and then modify some of your favorite foods to a low carb version. can be a great way to transition to a low-carb lifestyle. For example, eggs and cheese on a bagel can then be modified to scrambled eggs with cheese. Furthermore, things like make-ahead options like an egg casserole can be really helpful as well, and they tend to freeze well in addition to that. Ready-to-go options like protein shakes, boiled eggs can be really helpful too for those busy mornings. And as I noted here, I've given a couple of examples of different ways to use eggs, and eggs are such a great example of a protein source that's very versatile and can be used in so many different methods and cooked in many different ways. All right, so next up, here are some examples of sample meal plans that can be enjoyed for breakfast. They might include eggs, as I mentioned, cooked in any style that you like. If you have a little bit more time and you want to get fancy, maybe cracking an egg into an avocado to make egg boats, egg and avocado boats, or even tuna can be a great stuffing for avocado. Greek yogurt, plain Greek yogurt can be served with berries for a quick breakfast. Chia seed puddings, again, shakes and smoothies, or even the ready-made ones can be options as well. All right, so I'd like to bring your attention to the archive of recipes that we have available here on our Healthy Eating Jumpstart website. There are a variety of recipes from different sources, including Diet Doctor, as well as recipes that have been submitted by the Patient Advisory Board members. So we have a really nice collection of different recipes available on this website, and we hope that you'll enjoy some of them, as well as sharing them with your patients in the clinic. So I've added a quick link here for your reference. What is next? What's for lunch? So what are some of the basics for lunch? In this day and age, due to busy schedules, it is common to hear lunch getting skipped quite frequently. And I often get asked whether 3 meals a day is absolutely necessary on a low-carb meal plan. While it can be helpful to have a meal every 3 to 4 hours to help with energy balance, many folks who are on a low-carb lifestyle find that they're able to stay full for longer after their meals. So finding a strategy that works best for you and within your schedule can be a really great place to start. Some of my patients find that planning ahead or batch cooking recipes helps them to stay on track. Others might simply have a low-carb snack to tide them over until their next meal. There are also convenient options here that can be used, like ready-made meals or shakes, and potentially even dining out can be possible with some planning and some forethought. These over here are some examples of lunch that can be prepared in advance of the week for those who have that capacity to maybe do some pre-planning or meal planning for the weeks ahead. So things like everything but the kitchen sink salads can be a great way to have a base of leafy greens topped with different varieties of protein sources and fats for flavor and texture. Soups and stews are great for meal planning and batch cooking. Salads or leafy green wraps are another option. Protein and vegetable combos or leftovers from the night before can also be used for lunch the next day. Another one that can be prepared in advance is a crustless quiche, or what I like to call an egg casserole. Again, as I previously mentioned, that's a great idea for breakfast. It can be stored in the freezer, and it can also be taken out to be used for a quick lunch as well. For those of us looking for low-carb snack ideas, we do have a one-pager handout that's available and can be shared with your patient in the clinic. It includes ideas like boiled eggs, nuts and cheese combos, vegetables with dip, chicken salad, tuna salads, and many more. So I have the link provided on this slide for your reference as well to download. Now, we recognize that eating and cooking at home is not always possible. So we wanted to explore different low carb options when dining out, particularly at fast food restaurants, to provide some insight into what's available. So our team actually went out to these different locations, and we were really pleasantly surprised by the variety of options that we found. And we wanted to summarize all of these low carb options and turn it into a post here that's found on the Jumpstart website. So we hope that you enjoy reading this and sharing this with your patients in the clinic so that they have some ideas and options for when they are dining out at these restaurants. Furthermore, I wanted to again draw your attention back to the recipe archives that we have, where we have many different lunch options that can be utilized by your patients in the clinic. I wanted to note here that there is a filtering feature on the website, the recipe archive page, which will allow you to select specific meal types, and it can also help you to generate your custom meal plan as well. So we have ideas like cold pizzas. We've got the low carb fish stew that can be batch made. Rotisserie chicken is another time saver, as well as a great meal planning protein source that can be used for different recipes throughout the week. And lastly, a Cobb salad. For many folks, dinner is the time of day when they're able to share a meal with their spouse or their family or friends. It can be really hard to navigate low carb eating when you're cooking for more than one. And most of the time, there's no need to prepare a completely separate meal, a separate low carb meal for just one person. The trick here is to substitute that starch component for a lower carb alternative, or have that the low carb alternative as an option as well, or simply can leave the high carb ingredient out as well. So using the step process, you can start with what you know and make small adjustments along the way. Cooking techniques like using a crock pot, tray bakes, one-pan meals, and even air fryers, which are becoming really popular these days, are great tools in the kitchen that can be used for batch cooking and to save time and efficiency in the kitchen. So with this concept in mind, here are some ideas for sample meals that may be enjoyed for dinner with your family and friends. For example, fajita nights. Fajitas can be made into a salad or served in a bowl with a base of leafy greens or even with cauliflower rice. Hamburger nights. Hamburgers can be served bunless or with an alternative portobello mushroom that can be used as the bun replacement. Pizzas can be enjoyed with a different type of crust, an alternative to the traditional dough crust that's made from a blend of cauliflower or almond flour. Soup nights are quick and easy, can be left to cook and stew away in your crock pot. The high carb ingredients like potatoes can be replaced with lower starch alternatives like radish or turnips, kohlrabi, jicama, and more. Pasta nights are another fun one. They can be enjoyed with alternatives to pasta noodles like shirataki noodles or hearts of palm noodles as well. Spiralized veg is another option too. Now, what about for desserts? Now, desserts can be enjoyed in moderation on a low-carb meal plan as well. There are many variations of low-carb desserts found on the internet, but I wanted to share with you some quick and simple dessert ideas that can be prepared with ease at home. So some examples include whipped cream with berries, quick and easy cheesecake, that's also microwavable, dark chocolate mousse, which uses a secret ingredient of avocado, and also silken tofu is a great replacement for a low-carb version. Sugar-free Jell-O is another quick idea, as well as dark chocolate. Now, back in the fall regional meetings, I had shared with the collaborative our newly created sample meal plans. And I wanted to once again share this as a resource for you all. They are available to download up on the MCT2D resources page. I've also provided the link here with each of the slides. These meal plans are not intended to be a fixed meal plan in any way, but we want this to be a sample guide to provide some ideas to get started on a low-carb lifestyle. So we have one for a low carbohydrate meal plan as well as a very low carbohydrate meal plan. We're currently expanding on the options available, and soon we're really excited to have one for folks who prefer to follow a lacto-ovo vegetarian meal plan as well. So look out for that coming soon. Now, to summarize this section, we learned about specific meal planning strategies and recipe ideas that pertain to different meals of the day. Along with sharing these recipes and sample meal plans, it can be really helpful to establish a carbohydrate goal with your patients during the clinical visit. And then based on their carbohydrate target, it may be necessary to adjust medications prior to them transitioning to a low-carb meal plan. Things that have been helpful for my patients pursuing a low-carb lifestyle is to use a carbohydrate tracking tool, which is readily available nowadays through a phone app, or if they like to jot it down manually, that's of course an option as well. But it can be really helpful for patients to stay on track with their daily carbohydrate intake. The data, if they do prefer the online versions of the carb trackers, the data can be easily shared during clinic follow-ups as well, which can be really helpful to review together as a team. For folks who are interested in the very low carb or ketogenic meal plan, it can be helpful to consider transitioning one meal each week to allow for that gradual adjustment to these changes. All right, next up is individualization of meal plans. So this is a good segue to remind the audience that we're increasingly recommended to individualize interventions to fit one's personal preferences. And so this figure, there's a lot going on, but it essentially shows a summary of that person-centered approach to type 2 diabetes management. And this was published in the ADA's consensus statement last year, but it highlights the importance of considering the person as an individual with specific preferences and values, social determinants of health, and different barriers to care. So rather than choosing the one-size-fits-all approach in the treatment of type 2 diabetes, individuals should be treated and evaluated case by case based on their background, their experiences, as well as what they're willing to change. And so along these lines, I want to discuss and share some considerations on how we might tailor dietary recommendations to meet the diverse cultural backgrounds that we serve here in Michigan. But before I dive into some of those specific ideas, I'd like to share with you all a short clip from a diet doctor interview that was done with Dr. Tony Hampton, who is a physician here based in Chicago, and he shares about his experiences with low-carb meal planning in the African-American communities that he works with. And so he brought a few examples of his experiences recommending a low-carb lifestyle to his patients. So let me play this video.
We can't hear the audio.
Thank you so much for letting me know. Let's see. Feel that I knew how to allow for the audio to share. If anyone knows in the audience how I can have the video share their audio, that would be great as I try to find it. Oh, you know what? Let me stop sharing real quick. Okay, this should now work.
Or vegan is going to be a much harder sell than trying to get them to go keto or low carb. And that goes against sort of the vegan movement or the Eat Lancet report or these attempts to provide one global diet or one national diet even, which just doesn't work. And that's the perfect example for it. And so I think that's something that more people need to hear. The saying that we need to reach patients where they are and find the healthiest diet for them. So you mentioned the barbecue sauce, right? Like I'm sure that's a big pushback. Or the classic Southern grits, right? I'm sure that's a big pushback.
And the cornbread is the biggest pushback.
Yeah.
I mean,
so do you recommend like cornbread substitutes, low carb substitutes, or do you just say cut it out?
We just get rid of it. I've seen some. I'll be honest, I'm still learning. So we've played with some low carb, but cornbread it's hard to duplicate that texture. So I haven't been able to come up with a really good one yet. But that is exactly what I do. I actually say to them, everything that you like has a low carb version. So this is an experiment. And all you really need, like I do the Diet Dr. Low Carb chocolate cake literally every month. Like every month. I make cupcakes. So thanks to you guys, I do that every month. And so for me, I can take that and turn that into like a 7 to 10 carb snack. I barely eat 20 carbs prior to that. So who cares? I'm already at the ideal weight. So what I tell people is I'm about simplicity, and I can express that as we, kind of get started, but it's simplicity and making bite-sized choices. Most people, I had a patient today who did not know that barbecue sauce was an issue. And he said he puts barbecue sauce on everything. And he was like, what's wrong with barbecue sauce? It's tomatoes, right? I said, no, it's fructose corn syrup. Yeah, so I think that people just have to be educated. And once they're educated, you will be surprised that they'll do it.
All right, so that was just a really short clip of a pretty long interview, which was really eye-opening for me to listen to and to learn about. So if you all have some time, and if you'd be interested in listening to the rest of this presentation, I do have the link here below on this slide. So he brought up some really good points and examples of his experiences working, recommending low carb to his patient population, and he also noted that most of the time there's always a low carb alternative to most of the favorite foods. So I thought this was a good clip to share here.
Again, another great example on how it really is.
All right. So with that in mind, I wanted to share some ideas for how we might think about modifying various cuisines that are influenced by different regions and how low carb can be adapted to suit different dietary preferences. Dr. Hampton, in the previous slide, he mentioned that cornbread seems to be the hardest sell when it comes to finding an alternative. And I can certainly understand this, especially due to that difficulty of duplicating the texture of cornbread. And I've seen quite a few recipes online, coming up with alternatives to make a low carb version of cornbread using almond flour. So I shared one recipe here for an alternative to or a lower carb version of cornbread. And interestingly, they used corn essence to provide that similar flavor. So again, it's not going to be the exact duplicate, but something to consider sharing as a potential idea. Similarly, mac and cheese can be enjoyed by replacing pasta with cauliflower chunks. Barbecue is another popular dish in Southern cuisine and can still be enjoyed on a low-carb meal plan. The ingredient that to be mindful about is the barbecue sauce, which tends to be higher in sugar. Therefore, alternatives can be to use dry rubs or marinades, or even a sugar-free barbecue rub can be considered. Alternatives to potatoes might include cauliflower, radish, turnip, jicama, kohlrabi, and many more. Kohlrabi is also cauliflower is a great replacement to potatoes, especially for certain dishes like mashed potatoes, in which the cauliflower can replicate that creaminess, especially with the addition of some cheese or a little bit of cream. Here we have more examples of dishes that are found in Southern cuisine. Non-starchy vegetables like collards, collard greens, turnip greens, and mustard greens pair really great with protein sources like ribs, oxtail, ham hock, poultry, or fish. Similarly, green beans, cooked cabbage, okra stew can serve as great sides as well. Sweet potatoes and beans may be incorporated into one's meal plan in small amounts based on their carbohydrate goals. Now, when we take a look at cuisines that are influenced by Latin America, we can also find ways to modify that to a lower carbohydrate meal plan. I recognize that many of the staple foods that are common in the region are high in carbohydrates, including corn, beans, rice, plantains, or yams. However, sharing some of these ideas for alternatives and ways to modify some of these ingredients can help with patient engagement and acceptability. For example, alternatives to rice-based dishes may be riced cauliflower, broccoli, or cabbage. The rice can also be swapped out with a medley of vegetables too. Tortillas, on the other hand, can be replaced with a lower carb version, and I've linked a recipe here, one recipe here. It can also be served without the tortilla, for example, in a bowl with all of your favorite toppings. Masa harina, which is a ground cornmeal, is used in many dishes found in the region. Although replicating the exact texture and flavor can be challenging, just like the cornbread, there are recipes that use almond flour, a mixture of almond flour together with psyllium husk, to try to create something that is similar, a lower carb version of this ingredient. Mole, which is another popular dish in some regions, is generally considered low in carbohydrates. As a serving suggestion, we might recommend pairing that mole with non-starchy vegetables prepared per preference of the individual. There is also a diverse range of possibilities and options for low-carb dishes in the region, including calabacita, which is a type of squash, different types of grilled meats, fish and seafood, including ceviche, eggs, and soups like pozole, as well as endless varieties of salsa. I have an example here of a pico de gallo. All right. Now, rice and bread is often seen as a fixed part of many dishes that are influenced by the Middle East. However, the nice thing is that rice and bread usually accompany the main star of the show, which is the protein and the vegetables. So with some modification, these high-carb foods can be avoided or replaced with a lower carb alternative. For example here, rice dishes, as you can see here, makluba, may be prepared with cauliflower rice, seasoned with all of the same spices and flavors found in the traditional recipe. Dolma, wara ainab, or as we call grape leaves, can be prepared without the rice as well, using a mixture of ground meat and spices, or you can also use a cauliflower rice blend as well. Furthermore, kibbe, which is traditionally made with bulgur wheat, may be replaced with almond flour and egg mixture combined with ground meat to create something that is of similar texture to the traditional kibbe. Hummus and baba ganoush are delicious dips that go really well with other different dishes. served, and it can also be enjoyed in moderation with protein and vegetable combos. Again, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but I wanted to share a few examples of low-carb dishes that are influenced by this region. Spiced and grilled meats are very popular, like shawarma or kebab, as well as cooked vegetables like bamia, which is okra, salads like tabbouleh, fattoush, and soups like molokhia, which is, I believe it's called jute mallow, which are very delicious low-carb dishes. Next, going into cuisine influenced by South Asia, once again, using those principles of finding a low carbohydrate alternative can be a good place to start. For example, alternatives to rice, like in the dish called biryani, can be cauliflower rice. And cuisine that is often enjoyed in this region offer an extensive array of different types of curries mixed with spices. And each of them are unique to a different region. So although it's impossible for me to cover all of the variety of different curries available, I wanted to provide one general tip with maybe a common ingredient that is found, a common ingredient used in many of these curries. And so one example of that is potatoes, for example, found in aloo gobi. So alternatives to potatoes can be chunks of cauliflower, but also it works really well with things like chunks or diced zucchini, radish, or turnips. Dosa and upma are also a few additional examples of breakfast dishes that are readily enjoyed by many. I have found a wonderful resource called the Indian Veggie Delight. It is a food blog that shares many low-carb recipes to dishes found in this region. The author shares her dosa recipe as well as her upma recipe using almond flour as a replacement and cauliflower rice to make a lower carb version of some of her favorite foods. Here again are a few more examples of meals influenced by South Asian cuisine using low-carb ingredients, using low-carb ingredients. Protein sources like chicken can be cooked in a tandoor, and meat like lamb can be added to different types of curries, like Rogan Josh seen here. Vegetables are cooked in many different flavorful ways and spiced with herbs and seasonings. And chutneys are also a great way to accompany meals and can be enjoyed low carb as well. Lastly, I'd like to touch on cuisine that's influenced by East and Southeast Asia. In this region, noodles are a common staple. Similar to alternatives for pasta, hearts of palm noodles or shirataki noodles may be potential replacements to noodles. Rice-based dishes or wraps, like the summer rolls that you can see on this slide, can be made with potentially lettuce wraps or egg wraps or thinly sliced jicama wraps as well. Rice is another common staple found in the region. As previously noted, as a replacement to rice, it can be substituted for cauliflower as a low carb alternative. Dumplings can also be prepared with a different type of wrapper, such as, and I provide one example here of steamed cabbage leaf wraps, which can be used to parcel the meat filling. Finally, these are examples of a few dishes from the region that are prepared with low-carb ingredients. Seasonal vegetables are cooked in many different ways, including kailan that you can see here on the slide, chawanmushi, which is a steamed egg dish. Fish and seafood is also enjoyed in a variety of ways, including curries, soups, or prepared and enjoyed raw, like in sashimi. Tofu is also a common staple ingredient that's used in many different dishes. And one way that can be served is mapo tofu, which is a common dish. Now, I want to note that the collaborative is working we're working on creating a compilation handout referencing many of these ideas. But for the time being, we wanted to recommend that these handouts will be shared, or these slides will be shared with you, and potentially they can be used as a reference in clinic or shared with your clients during patient care. So we want to make that available for you all as well. Now, in the last part of my talk, I'd like to go over a few more tools to further tailor to and meet patient needs. Time is one of the most common barriers that I hear from my patients. And when patients are working in a job that requires long commutes, or perhaps they're spending a lot of their job on the road, time is of the essence. And so planning a little bit ahead of time can oftentimes offer great support. For example, making sure that they have some snacks available. For example, pairing two things for a quick snack can be a great place to start. As you can see here, protein and veg combos, veggies with fats, or fats with protein. So those two combos can be combined together to create a quick snack. Ready-made shakes come in handy on long commutes as well. And also, understanding how to make low-carb choices when dining out is a really important sort of educational tool there as well. Along with those tips, we have summarized a list of tips and tricks for low-carb eating on the road. It's available on our Jumpstart website as a blog post. So I've also attached the link here for your reference to be able to share with your patients in clinic. Another challenge that I hear from patients is the expense of eating low-carb meals. We do recognize and acknowledge that this is a barrier to many, and finding a solution to this can take some effort. We find that protein is oftentimes the biggest cost on a low-carb meal plan. And on this slide, I wanted to provide some ideas on how we can maybe reduce the burden of the cost. Some cuts of meat are usually more affordable than others, including options like whole cuts versus deboned or skinless. Cuts of meat like pork chops or ground meat, whole chicken, can also be lower in cost per ounce compared to other cuts of meat. And buying them on sale can also further help to save as well. Plant-based sources like tofu can be considered as alternative protein sources and are usually more affordable than their meat alternatives. And the other thing is canned varieties of fish, as well as chicken, can often be more affordable than fresh varieties and can be really useful ingredients to make snacks. Eggs, despite the inflation in price, still remains relatively a cheap protein source and can be used in so many versatile ways on a low-carb lifestyle. All right, furthermore, I wanted to share some additional ways to shop on a budget. So these ideas can include shopping in bulk when possible, joining membership for additional discounts, reducing the frequency of dining out, choosing water as a main beverage, and utilizing food storage techniques. For example, a little bit of batch cooking or freezing when we make extras, and tips on how to preserve fresh produce can be ways to save on a budget. There was an article in JAMA recently that found that U.S. households, especially in rural areas, are increasingly shopping at dollar stores for food. And this is an important finding, I think, for healthcare professionals because it lays the foundation of understanding social behaviors as well as the economic trends with inflation. And this can encourage conversations among healthcare professionals and patients about food choices that take into consideration affordability, availability, and access. And it's really important to talk about these things as well in the setting of a low carbohydrate meal plan. So we have created a resource on this regard, which is up on our Jumpstart website, which is a roundup of our top list, our list of top low-carb foods that we found at the dollar store. These include items like frozen produce, spices, canned goods, dried goods, nuts, and seeds. And we do have a blog post summarizing these items on the Jumpstart website. So to summarize here, I wanted to share again the resources that I've shared within this section. These resources were created in direct response to many of the requests that we received from the collaborative. So thank you all for those recommendations and the asks. And thinking about sort of future direction, we'd love to know whether, what other ideas and what other resources would you like us to create for use in your clinics going forward. So we're always looking for feedback as well. And so as a final thought, again, when it comes to low carbohydrate lifestyles and implementing a low carbohydrate lifestyles, the key here is it is an iterative process, and it's going to take some trialing and refining and adapting based on the individual's personal preferences, their backgrounds. And so it's going to change from individual to individual. And with that, lastly, I wanted to share one additional resource that's available for collaborative members. We are currently offering one-on-one 15-minute consultations to discuss anything and everything related to nutrition or low-carb lifestyles. Specific case reviews or even general questions, they're all welcome. So we have spots that are available in April and May. And if you are interested in booking an appointment, we do have a link here to schedule the consultation, or this, you can also go directly to the MCT2D website under, I believe, under the about to schedule a consultation with me, the dietitian, or with a pharmacist as well. So with that, I wanted to thank you all, and we'll open up the floor for any questions. Thank you. All right, so. So it looks like there's some comments here. Let's see here. Thank you, Julie. It sounds like you used the meal plan guide and it went successfully. So I'm happy to hear that you were able to use it in your practice. Thank you for the nice comment there. Okay, Nadia says, one of my patients shared an app with me called Flash Food, where you can get healthy discounted foods. Oh, that's really great to know. I was not aware of this. Now, is this an app that is free to download, or is it via a membership? I would definitely love to look into this more. Flash Food. Okay, only works at Meyer and Family Fare. All right. And it's free. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that would be a wonderful resource for our collaborative members to know about. What kind of fruits and how much are appropriate for? Okay, so Mary asked what kind of fruits and how much are appropriate for low carb diets. So it really depends on the individual carb goal. I would say from my experience, for individuals who are on a very low carbohydrate meal plan, so less than 50 grams a day, generally that doesn't provide a lot of wiggle room or space to incorporate fruits. Other than the low sugar or low glycemic fruits, including that include berries. So things like raspberries, strawberries, some blackberries and some blueberries can be options in small quantities. For individuals who might be on a more liberal, a little bit more, have a liberal carbohydrate goal, they may be able to incorporate 1 or 2 servings of fruit in a day. So remembering that typically about a half a cup of fruit can contain about 15, half a cup to 1 cup of sliced fruit can contain anywhere, can contain about 15 grams of carbohydrates, depending on the fruit. So I would say a good place to start would be berries, would be the safest bet for good options. Should we be okay, so Jessica asks, should we be focusing on carb intake or also set a caloric deficit along with a carb goal? That's a good question. So from my experience on a low carbohydrate lifestyle, there's no need to set a caloric goal. Setting a carbohydrate goal already, what we found and what I've read too in the studies is those who are on a low carbohydrate meal plan tend to already have a decreased, not sure what happened here. Leaf, it looks like you're sharing your screen here, but 1 second. All right. Sorry, I lost track of my train of thought here. So from what I've read in the studies, those who are on participants who are following a low carbohydrate lifestyle tend to naturally decrease their calorie intake through just the process of counting carbohydrates and keeping within their carbohydrate goals. The other thing to consider too is that the focus on low carbohydrate meal plans is to really tune into one's hunger cues, hunger and fullness cues. So eating when they're hungry, stopping when they're full. And through those practices, through those mindfulness techniques, we have found that oftentimes they are staying within they're able to see results, see progress with their goals while staying within their carbohydrate goal and their calorie goals as well. All right, so
it's Lifa. Are you okay with me sharing the CE instructions on the screen as a screen share?
Yes, please do, Lifa. Thank you. So it looks like we have one more, and thank you, Lifa, for sharing screen. I just saw the message come in about the CE instructions, so thank you for clarifying. All right, so it looks like we have one more question from Tiara saying, I have a diabetic patient who likes to cook but can't follow more than a couple of steps in recipes. Is there any resource anyone could send? Okay, so yeah, thank you for sharing, Tiara. So it sounds like this patient is looking for really minimal, simple, quick, and easy recipes. Is that right? What I would encourage is starting with understanding what they know and what they eat in a typical day. I find that can be really helpful to get a base understanding of what their intake looks like and maybe what foods they're familiar with. And that way, maybe we can start with then modifying and adjusting some of those meals or foods that they are comfortable with or that are familiar to them before sort of diving into new recipes. So that's sort of my recommendation there. We do have a couple of we do have some recipes up on the Jumpstart website that uses minimal ingredients. The one I can think of off the top of my head is the 3 ingredient egg cups. that are great for breakfast. Can be made in batches, so can be eaten at lunchtime as well. Could be a nice recipe to follow. Well, thank you all for joining. Are there any other questions? Anything else that I can help to clarify or answer or discuss? We have a couple of minutes left before the end of our time here. Thank you, Mary, for your nice comment. I'm glad to hear this information was useful and valuable to you. We will be sharing the slides to all the participants at the later today. So you'll find the available links to all of those resources and handouts that I mentioned, as well as any additional links to some of those videos and such. So I hope you can also print out any valuable slides that you would like to share or talk about with your patients as well in clinic going forward. Yes, I believe the recorded webinar will be shared with you all as well, together with the slides. Thank you all. Thanks, Lefa, for clarifying. It looks like the recording will be posted up on our MCT2D website within a week. Thank you very much to everybody. I will end this call then. Thank you all so much for joining, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and a great weekend. Take care.